Peter and the Pocket Guide to Hunting Vampires and Other Demon-like Creatures. Episode 6, Once Bitten, by Rich von Halt. The house lay still. The only sound the soft clicking of Mom's knitting needles as she reclined in the lazy boy. Her thick glasses perched on her nose, magnifying her eyes as they followed the flashing movements of the needles. Suddenly the front door banged open, and Peter rushed past in a blur. Mom's head snapped up. "Peter!" she called, her voice laced with concern. A beat of silence. "Peter, is everything all right?" But he was already gone, his footsteps pounding up the stairs. He burst into his bedroom and slammed the door, leaning against it heavily. His chest heaved as he fought to catch his breath, eyes squeezed shut. After a moment, he pushed off the door and stumbled to his desk. With shaking hands, he snatched up a worn book, The Pocket Guide to Hunting Vampires and Other Demon-like Creatures. Flipping frantically through the pages, he found the section titled Vampire Initiation and scanned until he saw the word ceremony. The initiation ceremony starts off with a low hum to call the spirits of the underworld. Peter read aloud, his voice barely a whisper. Once the spirits have entered the room, the person is bitten by the vampire. The person will then transform into a vampire. The screams are not from the transformation, but from the demonic spirits, also drinking their blood. The book thudded onto the desk. Peter tore off his red and white Hawaiian shirt, letting it puddle on the floor, followed by his khakis and shoes. He dove into bed and burrowed under the covers like a frightened child, facing the wall and staring at it with haunted eyes. Outside, Milena stood at his window peering in. Unnoticed, she observed him silently. Later, Peter slept fitfully, the lamp still glowing. With a sharp fingernail, Milena sliced through the glass pane, removing it delicately and setting it aside. She slipped through the opening into his room. Her gaze roamed over Peter's belongings, the typical trappings of a teenage boy. A framed photo on the desk caught her eye. Milena lifted it, studying the image of Peter and his father, their smiles forever frozen. After a long moment, she set it down and turned to the slumbering boy. Peter lay curled on his side, hugging a pillow, dressed in only a white tank top, boxers, and black socks. Soft snores drifted from his lips. Milena glided closer, looming over him. With a swift motion, she yanked the covers off. Her nails grazed his bare arm, feather light. Leaning in until her face nearly touched his, she inhaled deeply. Peter twitched in his sleep. Quick as a striking snake, Milena sank her fangs into the tender flesh of his neck. Peter's eyes flew open, bloodshot with sheer terror. His mouth stretched wide in a silent scream, vocal cords paralyzed by mind-numbing fear as the vampire's venom pulsed through his veins. The next morning dawned gray and cheerless. Mom stood outside Peter's bedroom door, her brow furrowed with worry. She rapped her knuckles against the wood. "Petey?" Silence. She knocked again, harder. "Peter, are you going to come out today? I saw you grab toilet paper. Are you sick? Do you need medicine?" Inside the room, Peter huddled on his bed, back pressed against the wall. He clutched a pillow to his chest like a shield. Wads of toilet paper were taped haphazardly to the side of his neck, stark white against his pallid skin. Mom's voice filtered through the door, tinged with concern. "Peter, it's almost noon and you missed breakfast." He remained motionless, staring blankly ahead. Outside, Mom hesitated, then sighed. As she turned to walk away, she muttered under her breath, "I hope you're not coming down with a cold. That's the last thing we need. The flu." In his room, Peter sat frozen, mind whirling with shock and disbelief. Days blurred together. Peter maintained his vigil on the bed, barely moving except to devour the contents of The Pocket Guide to Hunting Vampires and Other Demon-like Creatures. He pored over the section titled A Vampire Bite, eyes scanning the ominous words. When bit by a vampire, you would have to be drained completely in order to transform into a vampire. You cannot transform into a vampire without a ceremony taking place with the spirits of the underworld being present. If you find yourself bit by a vampire, it's best to stay indoors for 3 days. You will develop symptoms. Your symptoms will include dizziness, vision blur to sunlight, upset stomach, lack of hunger, absence of taste buds, and nausea. The bodies left for dead have to be dismembered and disposed of completely. If not, they may come back from the dead as a zombie-like creature. Peter snapped the book shut, the thud echoing in the stillness. He remained motionless as day faded into night, and night brightened into day once more. Sleep eluded him. He simply stared, mind churning with the horrifying implications of what had happened to him. Peter stood before the bathroom mirror, water dripping from his face. With trembling fingers, he peeled the toilet paper from his neck, revealing the bite marks beneath. The bruising had faded, leaving only 2 small telltale scars. He reached for his Hawaiian shirt hanging on the towel rack and shrugged it on. Fingers fumbling with the buttons, he popped the collar, attempting to conceal the damning evidence. Frustration mounting, he folded the collar back and simply buttoned the shirt to the top. A sharp knock at the door. "Peter, you have a guest!" Mom called. Brow furrowed, Peter cast one last glance at the scars before striding out to investigate. He swung open the front door to find Lily on the porch, her presence unexpected. "What are you doing here?" he blurted. Lily laughed, the sound tinkling in the air. "I wanted to see if you were okay. You left our date." "It was a date?" "Of course. Silly," she teased. "I haven't seen you in a couple of days. I was worried." Peter's mind raced. "How did you know where I lived?" "I went to the travel agency and talked to Pete." "You know Pete?" Surprise colored his tone. "I do now." Her grin was impish. Laughter bubbled between them, the tension easing. Lily stepped closer, arms reaching to encircle his neck. Peter flinched back, halting her advance. Lily's smile faltered. "Is something wrong?" "There's something I have to tell you." Peter grasped her hand, guiding her to the edge of the porch. "That night I left you at the theater," he began, his voice low and urgent. "Pete and I went to the caves." Lily's eyes widened. "Why would you go to the caves?" Peter met her gaze, words caught in his throat. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken fears. Moments later, Peter revealed the vampire bite, the scars stark against his skin. "I didn't know if I was going to turn into a vampire. That's why I didn't come around." The words tumbled out in a rush. Shock etched itself across Lily's features. "Tell me you're joking." "I wish I was. That's why I came into the bookstore and bought that book." "This is really weird, Peter." "You're telling me," he scoffed. Lily chewed her lip, considering. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." "But these guys at the travel agency work for the vampires?" Her voice rose with incredulity. "Something like that, yeah. And you work for the travel agency. So at some point, they're going to expect you to go back to the cave. And the person who bit you is probably there." "Oh, I'm not going back," Peter declared vehemently. "Peter, I think you need to take precautions," Lily cautioned. He sighed, shoulders slumping. "But I have to work. For my mom, at least." Lily glanced at her watch. "Speaking of, I have to get going. Do you need a ride?" Relief flickered across Peter's face. "That would be nice, yeah. Thank you." "Of course." Lily smiled, the gesture tinged with worry as they headed towards her car, the weight of Peter's revelation hanging between them. Milena sat motionless behind the wheel of her father's car, hands gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. The sun visor shielded her face, and dark sunglasses obscured her eyes. She had parked strategically, several houses down from Peter's, her vehicle blending into the quiet suburban street. Her gaze remained fixed on Peter's front door, unwavering. As if on cue, the door swung open, and Peter emerged, waving goodbye to his mother. Lily trailed behind him, and together they walked to her waiting car. Milena watched as they climbed inside and drove off, Peter oblivious to her vigilant presence. With a twist of the key, Milena brought the engine to life. She slipped the car into drive and eased away from the curb, maintaining a discreet distance as she tailed them through the winding streets. Inside Lily's car, the atmosphere was lighter. Lily pulled over just outside the travel agency, the brakes squealing softly as the vehicle came to a stop. Peter turned to her, a hopeful lilt in his voice. "I'll see you tonight?" Lily nodded, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Yeah." "'Kay. I'll walk over." Peter leaned in, his lips meeting hers in a gentle kiss. Moments later, Peter stepped out of the car, the door thudding shut behind him. He raised a hand in farewell, gratitude evident in his expression. "Thanks for the ride." Lily's smile widened, and she lifted her hand in a parting wave before pulling away from the curb and disappearing down the street. Unnoticed, Milena observed the exchange from the confines of her father's car. As Peter vanished into the travel agency, she shifted her focus to Lily's retreating vehicle. With a determined set to her jaw, Milena accelerated, the engine growling as she began her pursuit, intent on unraveling the secrets that bound them all together. Peter pushed through the door of the travel agency, the bell above jingling merrily. Inside, Niccolo and Sergio hunched over a table littered with playing cards, forks twirling pasta. Luigi and Angelo stood sentinel behind the counter, Angelo shoveling bolognese into his mouth. Luigi glanced up, eyebrows raised. "Hey, Peter, how you feeling?" "I'm good. Just a little tired," Peter mumbled, fatigue evident in the slump of his shoulders. Angelo swallowed a mouthful of pasta, a knowing glint in his eye. "I haven't gotten sick in years. You know why?" Peter shook his head, puzzlement creasing his brow. "Why?" "Garlic." Niccolo choked on his water, sputtering. Sergio chuckled, the sound low and amused. Peter's gaze darted between the two men, confusion deepening. Angelo waved a dismissive hand. "Never mind those guys, Peter. Listen to me, garlic is the best medicine. It's packed with diallyl disulfide and S-allyl cysteine." Peter's expression remained blank, uncomprehending. "It helps with the brain," Angelo continued, turning to Luigi. "What's it called?" "Dementia," Luigi offered. "Yeah, dementia." Angelo nodded sagely, returning his attention to Peter. "It helps with dementia." Niccolo, Sergio, and Luigi erupted into laughter, the sound bouncing off the walls. Peter forced a chuckle, the humor lost on him. "Yeah, I can see that." The backroom door swung open, and Pete emerged, a box of brochures balanced in his arms. "Hey, Pete!" Peter called out, relief washing over him. Pete grinned, setting the box on the counter. "Peter, how you feeling?" "I'm all right. You have a minute?" "Yeah, sure. Let me just put these down." Pete turned to Luigi. "Guy, can you put these out?" Luigi ambled over, peering into the box with a furrowed brow. "New brochures?" "Yeah, we redid them," Pete explained. "Why?" Pete's gaze flickered to Peter. "Because of Peter." All eyes swiveled to Peter, questioning. "Me?" Peter's voice pitched higher, bewildered. Luigi plucked a brochure from the box, unfolding it. He read aloud, "Hawaii, New York, Los Angeles, Miami, or even Italy. We can help you get there by boat, plane, or even train. We can organize your trip with fun excursions, hotel, and transportation accommodations. Happy traveling." Angelo guffawed. "You can't take a train to Italy." Pete shot him a withering look. "Shut up and eat your pasta." Luigi waved the brochure. What did Peter have to do with this? Pete glanced at Peter, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Never mind that. Just take these around the neighborhood." "Neighborhood?" Luigi echoed, incredulous. "Yeah, drop some off at the stores." "Why me?" Pete jerked his thumb towards Angelo. "Because he's eating." Angelo nodded, shoveling another forkful into his mouth. "Yeah, I'm eating." He pointed his fork at Peter. "The garlic, Peter, the garlic." "You got that second, Pete," Peter said, eager to escape the bizarre conversation. "Yeah." In the closet, a rack of Hawaiian shirts separated Peter and Pete as they draped their arms over it. Peter took a deep breath, steeling himself. "The other day, after you dropped me off..." "Yeah?" Pete prompted. "I'm 100% sure I was bit by a vampire." Pete barked a laugh. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. I was sleeping, and the next thing I know I had a vampire on the side of my neck." You sure you weren't dreaming? Pete, Peter growled, frustration mounting. He yanked down his shirt collar, exposing the marks. Pete's eyes widened. Oh shit, Peter. That looks like a hickey from your bookstore girl. Peter adjusted his collar aggressively, anger flaring. It's not a hickey from the bookstore girl. It's a vampire bite. Okay, Peter. Let's just say it's a vampire bite. Why you? Why now? I'm telling you, I saw my dad's car. What if the vampire that killed my dad saw us and followed us? Pete shook his head, skeptical. That's really elaborate. But it's not crazy. We were blindfolded. But you could see. Not great. Only good enough to see Dasco, Peter admitted. I don't know, Peter. Peter's gaze sharpened. Where's your dad? Pete hesitated, chewing his lip. He's running an errand, to the cave. The cave? Peter's voice rose, disbelief and dread mingling in the air between them. The night air pressed in, suffocating, as Peter walked the empty streets. His footsteps echoed off the pavement, a staccato rhythm that mirrored the pounding of his heart. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every flicker of movement a potential danger. Peter's eyes darted behind him, scanning the darkness for pursuers, real or imagined. He pushed through the door of the bookstore, the bell above tinkling discordantly. Inside, the warm glow of the lights and the musty scent of books offered a momentary reprieve from the oppressive night. An older woman stood behind the counter, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She smiled at the customer ahead of Peter, handing over a bag of books. Thank you. Come back and see us. The customer nodded, clutching the bag. I will. Take care. As the customer exited, the woman's gaze fell on Peter. Hi, how can I help you? Peter approached the counter, nerves fraying. Hi, I'm Peter. I'm Clarice, the woman replied, her voice warm and friendly. Hi, Clarice. I'm looking for Lily. Is she in the back? Peter's words tumbled out in a rush, desperation creeping into his tone. Clarice's brow furrowed. Oh no. She never made it in today. Peter's world tilted, his stomach dropping. She never made it in? Yeah. She had a shift today, but she was a no-show. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken fears. Peter's mind raced, conjuring terrible possibilities. Clarice leaned forward, concern etched on her face. Is everything okay? Peter snapped back to the present, his voice distant. Yes. I'm going to go see if I can find her. He turned abruptly, striding towards the exit. Clarice called after him. Okay. If you find her, tell her to call me. I will. Peter tossed over his shoulder. The words automatic, meaningless. The bus rumbled through the night, a hulking beast traversing the slumbering city. Peter huddled in the back corner, his body pressed against the window as if trying to disappear into the shadows. His eyes stared unseeing at the passing streetlights, his mind consumed by a single, terrifying thought. Lily was missing. Peter burst through the front door of his home, his heart hammering against his ribs. Mom? Silence greeted him, the living room empty and still. He raced to the kitchen, his voice rising in pitch. Mom? Nothing. Panic clawing at his throat, Peter charged into his mother's bedroom. Mom? The room was vacant, the bed pristine and undisturbed. Peter's gaze fell on the open window, curtains billowing in the night breeze. With trembling hands, he reached out and slammed it shut, the glass rattling in its frame. Fear coiled in his gut, cold and viscous. Something was wrong, very wrong. And Peter had a sinking suspicion that the nightmare he thought he'd escaped had only just begun.